It was exactly 2 a.m., and the only sound left in the house was the low, steady hum of the kitchen refrigerator. I was sitting alone at the dining table, aggressively rubbing my tired eyes. The wooden surface was completely buried under a mountain of unpaid bills, budget spreadsheets, and scattered work folders. My coffee in the chipped ceramic mug had gone ice cold hours ago. I was running on empty, just desperately trying to clear a small patch of space so I could open my laptop again. I needed to grind out just a few more hours of work before the sun came up. I reached over to move a messy stack of my 7-year-old daughter's school books and loose papers. That was when a crumpled, wrinkled piece of loose-leaf paper slipped out from the pile and fluttered down to the hardwood floor. I let out a heavy, irritated sigh. I was so annoyed at the extra mess. I bent down, snatched it up, and honestly, I was fully prepared to toss it straight into the trash can next to the counter. But as my fingers gripped the paper, my hand just froze mid-air. It was a drawing. It was done in those thick, cheap wax crayons I had bought for her a few months back at the dollar store. At first glance, it looked like the usual, chaotic, meaningless scribbles of a young kid trying to pass the time. But as I slowly smoothed out the wrinkled edges under the harsh, blinding kitchen light, my chest suddenly felt incredibly heavy. It was a picture of a giant man. His shoulders were drawn unnaturally broad, but they were completely hunched over in a deeply defeated posture. Resting heavily on his back, literally crushing him down, was a dark, crooked little house. The entire scene was shaded in aggressive, heavy strokes of dark black and stormy gray wax. It was a deeply gloomy, heavy, and honestly disturbing piece of art for a 7-year-old to create. But there was one specific detail that made absolutely no sense at all. Right in the center of that dark, exhausted giant's face was a massive, abnormally wide, bright red smile. It was drawn with a cherry red wax crayon, but it was not just casually colored in. She had pressed down so incredibly hard on that crayon that the red wax was thick, clumpy, and raised off the page. She had traced over that exact smile. Again, and again, and again. She pressed so fiercely that the thin paper was practically tearing and buckling underneath the pressure. It was a desperate, almost violent splash of bright color in an endless sea of depressing gray. I slowly sat back in my wooden chair, completely paralyzed, just staring at that thick red wax. Why in the world would this crushed, miserable, burdened giant be smiling so aggressively? And then, the reality of the situation hit me, like a physical, suffocating punch to the gut. The giant in the picture was me. The heavy, crooked house crushing his spine was this family, our mortgage, our debts, and our life. For the past 2 straight years, I had completely lost myself in the endless hustle of trying to get ahead. I had fully convinced myself that being a good, responsible father simply meant being a relentless financial provider. I thought true love was measured entirely by keeping the electricity on, putting hot food on the table, and making sure she had brand new shoes for the school year. I took a twisted, silent pride in being the tough shield that took all the brutal hits from the real world, so she would never have to worry. I truly thought I was being a hero for my family. But the harsh truth is that real heroes do not drag the toxic mud of their battlefields straight into their living rooms. And that is exactly what I did. Every single night, I would walk through that front door, carrying the invisible, suffocating weight of a highly stressful job and a painfully tight budget. I never yelled at her, and I never raised my voice, but I was never actually present, either. I was a walking, breathing ghost, haunting my own house. My face was constantly locked in a permanent, deep, unapproachable frown. I was always calculating numbers in my head, always worrying about tomorrow, always staring blankly at my phone screen, or aggressively rubbing my aching temples. Just yesterday evening, I vividly remembered her tentatively walking up to my desk while I was fiercely typing out a work email. She was holding her recent spelling test in her small hands, and her eyes were shining with that pure, innocent pride. Before she could even open her mouth to speak, my phone loudly pinged with another urgent crisis from my boss. I immediately let out this loud, dramatic, exhausted sigh of pure frustration. I did not mean to direct that negative energy at her at all, but I watched her little shoulders drop instantly. The light completely vanished from her eyes. She quietly hid the spelling test behind her back, looked down at her feet, and tiptoed back to her bedroom, without saying a single word. And the worst part is, I just let her walk away. I justified my terrible behavior by quietly telling myself that I was enduring all of this misery strictly for her future. I gave myself a free pass to be a miserable, unapproachable person, simply because I was the one paying all the bills. But looking down at this heartbreaking crayon drawing, I realized how incredibly blind and foolish I had been. Young kids absolutely do not care about the size of your bank account or your professional titles. They do not understand the complex pressures of mortgages, inflation rates, or toxic office politics. They only understand and absorb raw emotional energy. Children are like tiny, hypersensitive emotional sponges that soak up everything in their environment. And my beautiful, innocent daughter had been quietly absorbing all of my toxic, heavy, suffocating anxiety for months on end. She saw a father who was slowly being crushed to death by his own life. But that red smile on the paper changed everything. That thick, desperate, repeatedly drawn red smile. It was not a reflection of her current reality. It was a desperate wish from a child's heart. She knew deep down that I was hurting. And in her beautiful, innocent little mind, she was actively trying to heal me. She literally used that cheap red crayon to draw a smile back onto my face, because it was the one single thing she missed the most in this world. She was trying her best to rescue her own hero. That realization absolutely broke me into a million pieces. Hot tears hit the wrinkled paper. Before I even realized, I was quietly sobbing in the dark. Has a simple NGANUA drawing, or an innocent comment from your child, ever completely shattered your worldview and forced you to change your stressed-out attitude? I really need to know that I am not the only parent who has stumbled like this. Please, write down that emotional moment in the comments below, using proper Vietnamese with accents. And please, no spam. Sharing your story might just be the exact wake-up call. Another exhausted parent needs to read right now. Sitting there in that quiet, lonely kitchen, I made a profound decision. I swore a sacred vow to my own soul right then and there. I promised that from this day forward, I will leave every ounce of my heavy armor, my financial worries, and my dark clouds outside on the front porch. I vowed to always walk through that front door, carrying the brightest, most genuine, and happiest smile I can possibly muster, no matter how brutal the world outside was that day. If you also believe in this mission, please hit that subscribe button right now. To join us in spreading this incredibly positive and sacred energy, we have to protect our children's peace. I stayed awake for the rest of the night, ignoring my laptop entirely, just deep in thought about the psychology of parenting. I realized that true psychological safety for a child does not ever come from living in a massive house or having a room full of expensive toys. It comes entirely from the steady, predictable emotional stability of their parents. When a father smiles genuinely, it sends a powerful, invisible signal to his daughter's brain that her entire world is perfectly safe. It tells her that no matter what terrifying storms are raging in the outside world, the captain of her ship is strong, capable, and has everything under total control. By constantly projecting my stress, I had been silently screaming at her that our ship was sinking. I slowly stood up from that wooden dining chair. My legs felt incredibly stiff, but my mind was clearer than it had been in years. I picked up that wrinkled, tear-stained piece of loose-leaf paper, holding my daughter's masterpiece. I did not fold it up. I did not hide it away in a drawer with the unpaid bills. Instead, I walked straight over to the kitchen refrigerator. I grabbed the strongest magnet we owned, It was a little plastic starfish we bought on a family vacation years ago, back when I actually used to laugh. I placed her drawing right dead center on the fridge door. I put it at the exact eye level, where she would have to see it the second she walked into the kitchen. It was no longer just a piece of scrap paper. It was a physical anchor, reminding me of the father I desperately needed to be. I looked at the kitchen clock. It was almost dawn. I decided right then and there that today was going to be completely different. I spent the next hour furiously cleaning the house. I cleared away every single trace of my stressful late-night work session. I packed up my laptop, shoved the budget spreadsheets into my briefcase, and zipped it completely shut. I wanted the living room to look like a safe home again, not a stressful corporate office. I went to the bathroom and splashed ice-cold water on my face. I stared at my own reflection in the mirror for a long time. I actively practiced relaxing my jaw. I practiced softening my eyes. I had worn that heavy armor of stress for so long that smiling genuinely actually felt like using a muscle that had completely atrophied. But I knew I had to get it right. Hours passed, and the late afternoon finally rolled around. I heard the familiar heavy rumble of the yellow school bus, pulling up to the corner of our street. A few minutes later, the front door handle jiggled and clicked open. My little girl walked inside, dragging her heavy pink backpack behind her, just like she had been doing for the past few months. She immediately kept her head down. Her tiny shoulders were slumped forward. She was already anticipating a quiet, tense, and angry house. She was fully expecting to see me glaring at a glowing screen, too busy and annoyed to even ask how her day went. She slipped off her sneakers and quietly walked toward the kitchen to grab a glass of water. I was standing quietly near the hallway, just watching her. As she passed the kitchen island, she suddenly stopped dead in her tracks. Her head snapped up. Her eyes locked onto the white refrigerator door. She saw her drawing. The giant man with the crushing house and the bright red wax smile was hanging perfectly center, held up proudly by the starfish magnet. For a few long seconds, she just stood there completely frozen. I could literally see her little brain trying to process what was happening. She probably thought she was in deep trouble for drawing on my important work paper. But then, she slowly turned her head and saw me standing there in the hallway. I did not cross my arms. I did not sigh. I did not check my phone. I took a deep breath, dropped down to one knee so I was right at her eye level, and I smiled. It was not a fake, polite, forced smile. It was a massive, bright, ear-to-ear grin. It was the exact same smile she had desperately colored onto that page with her thick red crayon. I let all the love, all the pride, and all the warmth I had been hiding for years just flood completely into my face. Her eyes went incredibly wide. Her mouth fell open in pure shock. And then, something absolutely magical happened. The heavy, invisible weight that she had been carrying around on her own tiny shoulders just completely vanished. Her entire face lit up like a beautiful sunrise. Her eyes started sparkling with this immense, overwhelming sense of pride. She realized that her father had actually seen her. She realized that her little desperate drawing had worked. She dropped her pink backpack right there on the floor and ran toward me as fast as she could. She threw her arms around my neck so hard, she almost knocked me over backward. I wrapped my arms around her, buried my face in her shoulder, and just held her tight. I knew right then that if I had continued down that dark, stressful path, I would have eventually destroyed her spirit. I would have taught her that being an adult just means being miserable all the time. I would have unknowingly programmed her to associate success and hard work with anger, isolation, and sadness. By choosing to smile, I was giving her back her childhood. I was giving her permission to be a kid again, free from the crushing burden of worrying about my happiness. In that specific moment, I knew I had completely shifted the trajectory of our lives. I finally understood that the most powerful thing a father can provide for his family is not just a paycheck. It is emotional stability. True mental toughness is not about silently enduring misery and projecting that bitterness onto everyone around you. True strength is having the incredible discipline to smile, to be a beacon of light, and to create a safe harbor for your children, even when the outside world is absolutely chaotic. A father's genuine, optimistic smile is literally the most peaceful, secure sky that a child can ever live under. It is the absolute foundation of their confidence and their lasting joy. That simple, messy crayon drawing saved my relationship with my daughter. It reminded me that underneath all the adult responsibilities, I am still her hero, but only if I choose to act like one. If this story touched your heart, or if you truly believe that a parent's smile is the greatest gift they can give a child, I want you to do something right now. Please scroll down to the comments and type the word smile. Let us flood that comment section with the word smile to spread this sweet, warm energy to every single parent watching this video. You never know who desperately needs to hear this message today. Thank you so much for listening. And remember to always leave your heavy burdens at the door.